Thanks for watching The Thought Criminals, named after the resistance to the totalitarian thought police of George Orwell's 1984, which we now refer to as being woke. I'm your host, Rachel Alexander. I'm a weekly contributor to Townhall and other sites and the editor of Intellectual Conservative. And this is my mall, Ralph Benko, who worked in or with the Reagan, W. Bush, and Trump White Houses. He's a weekly columnist for Newsmax, co-author of the Capitalist Manifesto, and co-founder and executive chairman of the 185,000 member Capitalist League Facebook group. Well, today we are going to talk about an article I wrote about the national popular vote, which the last I checked was up to, I think, 546 comments full of hate against me. And then we will move on to...
Wow, I think that's a new record for you, isn't it?
It is. I got a lot of hateful comments about my COVID article several months ago, but I think this one has outlapped them. And I even saved a bunch of the absolute worst ones because I couldn't believe people were telling me such sexist things. They were literally attacking me for being a woman for writing it. But anyway, then we'll move on to an equally controversial article, which is your article. One of your better ones, I believe. I mean, they're all good, but I really enjoyed your article on the gold standard. But when it comes to whether Trump is the cause of inflation, you and I are going to get into it. So,
anyway. By the way, that I've written that before, and it's still true. But that was not in this particular column. This column was rising prices, which is called inflation, is not caused by some kind of mysterious forces of the universe causing gas prices to go up and grocery prices to go up. It means the dollar buys less, and that manifests as a symptom as rising prices. But tanking the dollar is the cause. Rising prices is the effect. Most people don't understand this, and it's very important that somebody does. At least you, Rachel Alexander, I hope I can bring around to understand this very important point, because Washington is clueless. And as long as Washington remains clueless, inflation is going to remain a plague on this country and the world.
Okay, but I mean, you could go back and say we devalued the dollar in the early 1970s when we went off the gold standard. And what about when we have periods since then of little inflation?
Right. Nixon, here, we'll get to that. Right now, we're going to talk about the national popular vote, which, by the way, I've always been really flexibly against, because it was being proposed by progressives, and they only propose stuff that they think is going to is going to stack the deck in their favor. So I never researched it, because I said, hey, if this is coming from the left, I'm against it. Okay, but you wrote a fascinating column that gave me pause and is making me rethink whether or not the left has just gone off onto La La Land, shooting themselves in the foot again, in which case I want to hand them ammo. So what did you discover at your booze fest in Miami?
So basically, I wrote...
Who's behind this? Who's pushing this? Who on the right?
There are people on both the left and the right. It's a misnomer that it's just the left that is pushing this. There's also, and I name a lot of people in my article, like former Congressman Bob Barr. There's plenty of conservatives, lots of conservative state legislators, like the most conservative state legislatures in Arizona are behind this. And that's what people don't understand. And they think the national popular vote being pushed is the version that, Senator Elizabeth Warren and AOC want, which would, get rid of the Electoral College. There would be a constitutional amendment, and they would take away the power of the states over how elections are done when it comes to the president. Whereas the one that I'm writing about, the national popular vote movement, which has actually been adopted by several states already, and a lot of those have Republican-dominated legislators, this would not change the Constitution. It would not get rid of the Electoral College, and if the states didn't like it, they could back out. And I just want to say, I actually wrote an article against this movement back in 2011, which I linked to in my article. And I wrote that before I became fully educated on the issue. And I will say this, in my 20 plus career, writing political articles, I believe this is the only issue I have ever changed my mind on. This is the only one that I've ever really gone against the conservative base, unless you include the one I wrote about COVID a couple months ago, which was just a small aspect.
Which we're not going to talk about here. At least we get put in jail again, right?
Yeah.
So back to the national popular vote, right?
Yeah, which this shouldn't get us in jail, because there's, half of it is progressives behind it, right? So anyway, once I did the research, and this was hours and hours, this wasn't just, oh, I'm just gonna, do a quick internet search for half an hour, or whatever, like my usual articles. This was several hours that it took me to come around. And there's a book I recommend in my article if people want to read and get to the bottom of it.
And the name of the book is?
It's in here. I'll have the link posted at the it's to my article at the end of this video.
Nancy Drew discovers the interstate compact. Okay, whatever. It's in your town hall article about the national popular vote from last Monday, so people can go look it up.
Yeah, I don't even name it in here. I just link to it. So anyway, basically, I discovered that conservatives are no longer going to keep winning the presidency as long as we just have a few swing states deciding elections. And I think this has become more imperative lately because of election fraud. Instead of, with just a handful of states, Democrats can concentrate their efforts on just those handful of states. If you have a national popular vote, Democrats need to spread out their efforts across the country. And I believe it will be much harder for them to pull any shenanigans once you have to look at all different parts of the country. And so that's what it came down to me. And if you look at how demographics are shifting in a lot of the swing states, Arizona used to not be a swing state. Now we are. Our voter registration advantage in the state and in Maricopa County has gone down to only 4 points ahead of Democrats. Republicans only have 4 points ahead of Democrats. And so, as it's shifting, why are we holding out our hopes on just these swing states that are increasingly look like they could be going to the Democrats? And finally, and I address all kinds of arguments in my article, but finally, I want to point out that the founding fathers were actually mixed on this, and people who try to cite the Constitution and the Federalist Papers, in defense of sticking with the existing state winner take all, that's not accurate. And I wrote
Rachel, for the uninitiated, okay, you are not calling for the repeal of the Electoral College the way AOC and Elizabeth Warren are. You're saying that you've read the Constitution and you've read the debates in the Constitution
and the Federalist Papers,
and the states get to say how they are going to allocate their electors, right? So the president is not actually voted. We don't vote for the president. We vote for electors who are pledged to the president. But the really interesting part I found is a state can choose to send all of its electors to whoever wins the majority, or it can allocate its electors according to the proportion of the vote. So if somebody, let's say a state has 10 electors for
and two states do that, they allocate percentages, right?
So and somebody wins that state 60-40, then that means they get 6 electors, and the person who got 40% gets 4 electors. Other states, the predominant number of states say, winner take all, whoever wins the majority in our state gets all of our electors. But the Constitution doesn't call for that. The Constitution leaves it up to the state, and it is therefore constitutionally as legitimate for states to allocate their electors proportionally as it is to give them winner take all. So let me just try to lay out this because it's a little geeky. So our millions and millions of viewers will understand what's exactly going on here. It turns out that a bunch of states have created what's called a pact, or an interstate interstate compact, in which they say, "Hey, we are agreeing for now. We can always back out of this, to throw in with all of these other states who have decided to allocate their electors proportionately rather than winner take all. And there are something like now 15 states that have joined this interstate compact.
Yeah,
which is
we're about halfway there. We still need a handful of other states to join in order to get that magic number of electoral votes where, you know, it won't matter what the other states do. We'll have enough to decide the election in the states that have joined the compact.
right. And so here's the really intriguing part, because I always thought the national popular vote, because all I was reading about was the Pinko version, okay, was meant to stack the deck, which the Pinko version is, in favor of Democrats and in favor of the left. So I said, hey, you know, Hillary Clinton got a greater popular vote than that other guy who actually won the election in the Electoral College, the orange one. I can't remember his name right now.
Orange
there were
bad.
Mr. Right, Orange Man Bad, right. And so I believe they read the tea leaves and they said, hey, we can get larger popular votes than the Republicans. So let's stack the deck by rejiggering the rules, which they do all the time. They're always looking for ways to game the system. And by the way, so are we. It's just that they're better at it than we are.
No, we just do it legally.
Well, they're better at it than we are. Let's leave it at that. So but this doesn't mean that whoever wins the national popular vote, the most votes nationally, is the winner, because this is still done state by state. And so you've got a few, and what I was worried about is these big blue states, heavily populated, like California and New York, would have an undue advantage because there are so many people, they're so blue, and there are so many people there, but they would only get to allocate their electors. If they get a national majority, it still has to be on a state-by-state basis as to who gets awarded the electors from each state. So I like the fact that this still leaves the power with the states, because I'm a federalist kind of guy, and I like the fact that I really was found your argument very compelling. That right now, really only about 10 states determine the presidency, because 40 states are either, you know, all red or all blue. It's a given, and nobody buys ads there, nobody campaigns there, because you know the way it's going to turn out. And if it's winner take all, you neglect that and you put all of your resources into the swing states, giving now the swing states, or the purple states, disproportionate power over the election. And that also allows the dark money, the left-wing dark money, which is vastly bigger than the right-wing dark money, Arabella Partners and whatever, to focus their resources where they can legally steal the election by focusing their firepower, their dark money power, on the purple states, trying to tip it toward the dogs instead of the pachyderms. So I thought that was a very, very insightful and perceptive view. I'm not all the way there yet, but I'm no longer. I've moved from hell no to no, and that no is a kind of like is now beginning to. I went from hell no before I read your article to no, and then I read your article again, and I went to maybe. So, and I'm pretty stubborn, not as stubborn as you, but I'm pretty stubborn. And the fact that you were able to move me, the second most conservative man in the world, according to the Washington Post, toward thinking that this might actually be a way to rig the game in our favor, which I'm all for, legally, which I'm also all for, then that was a pretty powerful article that you wrote. I hope you will send to, I think, isn't Saul Anuzis the major domo of the efforts on the right to move from the national popular vote, or is Saul just one of the operatives?
Oh, he's definitely one of the key players behind it, and you know, and I think he was definitely persuasive in bringing me on board. I mean, he's such a reasonable, intelligent man, and very conservative. You know, when you sit down and talk to someone like that, you're really gonna want to listen and hear him out. And so, you know, I think he's smart, you know,
I know, but I just want to know who's behind this, right? Like when it came to legalizing marijuana, it was George Soros, right? When it came to when it came to enacting gay marriage, it was that guy from Colorado whose name I'm drawing a blank on. Okay, so there's always somebody behind these things.
I don't know the names off the top of my head. Afterwards I can try to, look it up and find out. Because yeah, obviously I'm sure there's billionaires behind it. But I just know it's coming from both the left and the right. And what I want to ask you, Ralph, is what is the matter with people on the right to come after me so viciously over something like this, and to just badger me, and most of them didn't even read the article. I can tell because they keep repeating the same things to me in the comments and saying, you would get rid of the Constitution, you would get rid of the Electoral College, you would end up with tyranny of the majority, blah blah blah. I mean, what's going on? Do you understand why these people are so nasty towards me and vicious and don't even bother to address my arguments?
Well, I hate to break the news to you, Rachel, since I know how worshipful you are toward Donald Trump. But
you always say that. I can support Donald Trump without being blasphemous and worshiping him like God. I don't think anyone on the right worships him, because most of us are Christians and we're not allowed to worship humans.
Fine, adore him. Then
I don't know, that sounds kind of sexual, and he's got a wife. I'm perfectly happy.
Yeah, yes, okay, well, let's see. Exalt him. Okay.
That is also blasphemous,
Oh, God.
The left uses language like that all the time about the people on the right versus Trump. And
in spite of Donald Trump,
it doesn't work. It's not true. You can say it till you're blue in the mouth, but we don't worship Trump.
In spite of Donald Trump's best efforts, in spite of his best efforts or worst efforts, however you want to characterize.
And by the way, he supports this.
Oh, I'm back to hell no. Okay, so the bad argument with me, Rachel, bad argument with me. 50% of the people in the United States remain below average in intelligence. Can you imagine that? But it's true. You could look it up. 50% of the people of Americans are below average in intelligence. And apparently wow is right. This is an underreported national scandal. Okay. And
we're breaking it on our show today.
What's that?
We're breaking it on our show today, though.
Apparently, they feel this 50% of the country who is below average of intelligence feels compelled to write mean comments on in your town hall articles. But I say what the World War II bomber pilots used to say, and that is, if you're not catching flak, you're not over the target. So it's a badge of honor that you've gotten over 500 mean comments on your revelation, on your big reveal about the national popular vote and the interstate compact to allocate votes proportionally rather than on a state-by-state winner-take-all basis. So I really recommend that you get in touch with the high commanders like Saul of this effort, and tell them what kind of reaction send them the link, tell them what kind of reaction this column drew, because really you are one of the most effective advocates of this, partly because you changed your mind and you were not too proud to basically move from opposing it to supporting it, and you make some very powerful arguments.
Well, you're the only one who really recognizes that. I just can't get over all the hate. But when I wrote about this issue a couple times in the past, I got hate over it as well. So I mean, I knew I was going to get it. I just don't understand. And maybe it's because our side is lacking a little bit in logic. We do have people on our side who can be overly emotional. And I think they just can't get past, oh, this is the Constitution and this would destroy the Electoral College. They can't see past that argument. They refuse to realize it doesn't get rid of the Electoral College. I mean, that's kind of where I have ended up trying to understand all the objections. But anyway, we could go on and on forever about the comments. I really did not appreciate the one that told me I just need to watch porn and learn from it. I mean, some of this stuff was just disgusting. But moving on to your gold standard column, which I found fascinating, because you get to the root of the problem, which is the devaluing of our currency, which is what is doing it. And then I also want you to address how you said part of the problem when we left the gold standard was President Johnson closed the gold pool in London, and explain what that means.
Okay. Well, first of all, I just want to say that inflation is probably the #1 domestic issue in the midterm elections, and will probably be, based upon my reading of the data that says that inflation is going to be continuing on through 2023 and 2024, that this is going to be the overriding issue, the same way it was between Reagan and Carter. Not the only one, but the dominant issue, #1. #2 is I'm old enough to have remembered I was in law school in the late 70s, and inflation was 10%. It's approaching 10% again. And by heavens, the people in Washington were clueless. They were blaming the oil sheiks and OPEC and sticker shock and the energy crisis and all kind of stuff. And Jimmy Carter, our Sunday school teacher president, gave speeches saying, nobody knows. I've talked to all the experts. Nobody knows what causes inflation.
When you talk about how stupid he is, why do you have to point out that he's a Sunday school teacher? Because that to me is like the least relevant thing about him. I mean, he was just a blah president on the left. So
excuse me, Rachel. He deregulated beer. And because of his deregulation of beer, he was a huge deregulator. Okay, so give the devil or the angel his due. Okay, he deregulated airlines. So
if he's a Sunday school teacher, why is he the big person deregulating beer? Honestly, that tells you something's up.
And he's a Baptist, and he's deregulating beer. So wow, he's deregulated trucking. He deregulated the railroads. Okay, he's
basically an atypical Southern Baptist, is what he is.
He's an
atypical Sunday school teacher.
He's a teetotaler. Okay, I'm just basically saying he's a little Sunday school teachers tend to be a little otherworldly and a little bit unctuous.
I was a Sunday school teacher when I was in high school. I taught 1st and 2nd grade girls. So I'm going to push back on that.
QED. So I'm basically saying he was not shrewd as a in terms of economic policy, although he did get deregulation beautifully. And we owe the beer renaissance that America is enjoying today to Jimmy Carter. So every time you open up a microbrew, every time you go and help yourself to, one of these artisanal beers, you should pour a little libation.
I bet a lot of our viewers don't even drink, so they could care less.
I don't drink, but I'll drink to the fact that I don't drink.
That is so not true. We have you on video on previous shows drinking.
Yes, but that was then. This is now. I'm now on the wagon, mostly.
Revisionism.
No.
This reminds me of 1984, where they would just, delete parts out of books.
No, I didn't.
It never happened.
A year ago, I used to have a cocktail with dinner every night. Okay, and now I don't. So I'm just telling you, this is not dogma. I'm just saying Jimmy Carter was an idiot when it came to inflation. Okay, it was embarrassing. And I've written multiple columns about how he got inflation totally wrong. Back then, they believed in the neo-Keynesians believed in sinking the dollar and raising taxes. And what did we get? We got a 20% misery index. we got 10% inflation and 10% unemployment. Biden doesn't have the unemployment now, but he's getting the inflation which he inherited from Trump, who beat up Jay Powell, who was chairman of the Fed, saying, I want a weaker dollar, I want a weaker dollar, I want a weaker dollar. And Powell gave it to him. And just like Milton Friedman predicted, 1 to 2 years later, you had the you had virulent inflation. But let me just
okay, so I'm going to push back, and granted, this is your area of expertise, so I probably need to just write another article about this before I debate you. But you're blaming a lot of this on Trump, and so I want to know, if Trump had done better to curb inflation, what would he have done differently? You know, not put more money into the economy,
he would have told
interest rates wouldn't keep going down.
He would have told Jay Powell to hold the value of the dollar steady. There are various ways of doing this. The best way and the most unfashionable way is to go forward to restore the classical gold standard, which made America the richest.
Okay. There's no way Trump was going to go back to the gold standard. So other things
on the campaign trail, he lavishly praised the gold standard twice. Okay, and it was the thing that I liked best about him, and I was hoping he would pivot and go for the gold. Trump loves gold, by the way, but he's got the attention span of a goldfish, so he didn't. And all of his
it's a 1 in 1,000 chance that any president was going to go back to the gold standard in the last few years. Okay, that's just a given. So other than the gold standard, what should Trump have done differently?
The price of everything, including the price of money, is determined by two things: supply and demand, and nothing else. Okay, so the Fed prints money. They don't literally print it; it's printed over at the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, but they generate money by on their computers and they inject it into the banking system. If you can look at Fred, the Federal Reserve Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis's charts, and you can see that they injected a huge amount of cash into the banking system. The Fed did, under the direction of Donald Trump. And so if Trump had said, I want a steady dollar rather than a weaker dollar, and in a previous column, maybe 3 weeks ago, I quote 3 out of dozens of news reports quoting him verbatim, telling Jay Powell to sink the dollar, because he thought that would give us a trading advantage against our trading partners. And
okay, well then let me ask you this: would Biden have done anything differently than Donald Trump did then when it comes to the Fed?
Well, probably not, because he reappointed Jay Powell. I wrote columns advising him not to reappoint Jay Powell, to appoint an inflation hawk instead of an inflation dove. Did he listen to me? No.
And Powell served under which prior presidents?
Donald Trump.
But but didn't he serve under other?
He not as Fed chairman, which is the powerful one. He may have been on the board before under Obama. I don't know, and I don't care. But he was just one governor among like a dozen votes on the Federal Open Market Committee. So the point is, there are different ways. And by the way, Alan Greenspan confessed many years after the fact that before he went crazy as the maestro, he was emulating the gold standard. Okay, Alan Greenspan speaks very positively about the gold standard. The fact is, Alexander Hamilton put us on a gold standard when America was first put up, and that plus some other really good financial hacks took America out of a debt-ridden, impoverished collection of former colonies into this massively successful, prosperous, equitably prosperous land of opportunity. And we did that under the gold standard, which we stuck to until the Civil War, and we went off the gold standard during the Civil War. People always go off the gold standard during war. I don't want to get into that right now because it's a desperate measure. Okay, then we went back onto the gold standard. Okay, and that held us through until 1922 in Genoa, where we went from the gold standard to the phony gold standard called the gold exchange standard. And then that caused the boom of the roaring 20s, and it precipitated the fake gold standard then failed and caused the Great Depression. And then we went back on a phony gold standard after the Great Depression, but it was better than what we had before. And then Johnson, wanting guns and butter, said, "Oh, the heck with it. Okay, I'm not going to officially take us off the gold standard. I'm going to stop buying gold when the price of gold goes up, and I'm going to stop selling gold when the price of gold goes down on the London pool, where people actually bought and sold gold using national currencies to keep their currencies stable, and inflation began creeping up." Then Johnson left office in disgrace. Okay, yes, it was the Vietnam War and a bunch of other bad things that he did, but he also unleashed inflation. And then Nixon came along, and his Treasury Secretary, a morally bankrupt SOB named John Connally, a Democrat, by the way, was governor of Texas, who got shot with Kennedy, who himself died a bankrupt. He worked on the camp. They went to Camp David, and they decided the Nixon shock to be putting up a 10% tariff and imposing wage price controls and, quote, temporarily closing the gold window. And when Nixon gave his infamous speech on August 15, 1971, he said, "I promise you that prices will be the same tomorrow as they are today. Only put aside the bugaboo of devaluation." And you know what? On August 16th, prices were the same. But within 10 years, the dollar lost 85% of its buying power because Nixon had closed the gold window. We had the virulent inflation of the 1970s. Nixon left office in disgrace. Gerald Ford, who was no smarter than Jimmy Carter, just to put it gently, had everybody wearing whip inflation now buttons. He didn't have a handle on it. Carter came along. Carter didn't have a handle on it. And then the supply siders, Jack Kemp, under the guidance of Bob Mundell and Art Laffer, said, what we need to do is we need to go to the gold standard, stabilize the dollar. And even though Reagan, after he won on this on the supply side platform, didn't push forward on the gold standard, he did give his backing to Paul Volcker to stop printing all this money, and it drove interest rates up to the stratosphere, but it crushed gold, it crushed inflation for 40 years, and now it's back.
Okay, so here's the question I want to ask you. If inflation is caused by devaluing the dollar, you know, the Fed meddling, then would you assign any blame to Biden for what he's done outside of the monetary policy?
No, I would assign blame to Biden for the inflation that is yet to come. When the Biden inflation hits us next year, trust me, I'm not an apologist for Joe Biden. Okay, I like the guy. I don't like him as much as I love AOC, but I think he's a decent human being.
Dumb thing that woman said. Oh, Clarence Thomas should resign.
I thought they.
What? Why? Did she get any stupider?
You're just jealous because she is always on offense. So look, let's not go.
Stupidest idiot. Oh my gosh. Shut her mouth.
He was an honor student. Look, that's not the point. And Clarence Thomas has nothing to do.
She got sympathy grades, okay?
When we not at all. She's a smart little cookie. She's just misinformed, and she's dogmatic about these.
I'm a doorknob.
about these crazy socialist policies that she, in spite of the fact that socialism has catastrophically failed the 44 out of 44 times that it's been tried, she still thinks that it sounds like a fetching idea. So
which ones of Biden's policies are going to lead to this inflation in the year?
He reappointed Jay Powell, and
so it's still monetary policy that.
Yes, it's still monetary policy.
So you just still say it has nothing to do with spending?
No, inflation, spending is trust me, I was one of the few, along with Louis Lerman, supply side deficit hawks. Okay, I'm anti-big spending, totally anti-big spending, particularly the profligate spending on stupid stuff, the bridges to nowhere and whatever. Okay, but spending doesn't cause inflation. Taxing doesn't cause inflation. Printing money causes inflation. But Milton Friedman said, and every respectable economist in the world agrees, inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. I am willing to hold Joe Biden to account for the bad things having to do with spending, for the bad things having to do with his billionaire taxing unrealized capital gains, which is a horrible idea, which I'm hoping that your wonderful U.S. Senator Kristen Sinema and the wonderful U.S. Senator from West Virginia, Joe Manchin, will bring that to a screeching halt. Okay, Biden, much to my chagrin, I thought better of him, is proposing a lot of bad taxing and spending programs, but those are not the cause of inflation. And what's causing me to facepalm is the Biden is accusing price gouging, greedy big business and now Putin as the cause of inflation. This inflation was here before Putin's invasion of Ukraine, way before. So trying to pin this on Putin is just cynical, either stupidity or cynical politics, or both, okay? And blaming big business has always been greedy. The only thing that restrains big business from raising prices is competition, not golden-heartedness, but competition is a far more powerful constraint on big business than regulation. Regulation is gained by big business to crush their upstart competition. So the donks are like, this is really stupid. You're blaming Putin and big business. They're not the cause of inflation. But the Republicans are like, oh, it's Biden's spending. Biden's spending is a bad thing. Let's oppose it. But number one, you guys voted for a lot of it. And number two, so your hands are not clean. And number two, spending is never the cause of inflation. It's a bad thing in its own right for other reasons we don't have time to get into tonight, but it's not the cause of inflation. Inflation comes from the Fed running the printing press at the president's behest and flooding the market with way too much money, driving down the dollar or the value of the dollar, and leading to generally rising prices. The end.
Okay. So we can agree that, this monetary policy that you've described does cause inflation, but when it comes to other causes behind inflation, that's something I think I will have to address in a further column, because you're kind of ahead of me on this issue. So I think we'll just leave it at that.
The libertarian, one of the best libertarian economists, one of the most decent and one of the funniest, Dan Mitchell, devoted his column at International Liberty on this 2 days ago. I scooped him. I was a year ahead of him in predicting this. I was months ahead of him in pointing to the cause of it, but he nailed it. I think it was like yesterday or the day before. So the place to start is look up Dan Mitchell, International Liberty, inflation, and you'll see.
He'll say exactly what you're saying. I get it. Okay.
Yeah. He says what I said, so that's all you have to do. Now there are two of us. You can end your research and write a column.
I just say whatever you say. Boom, there we go. Okay.
Well, you don't have to say whatever I say. Just say amen, Ralph, and you'll be on safe ground, at least when it comes to inflation, monetary policy, and the gold standard.
All righty then. I think that wraps us up. So thanks for watching, everybody, and we will see you next week.